So thanks everybody for coming. My name is Noriko Buffard, and I am a Chrome browser specialist. And I've had the opportunity over the last year to talk to many different enterprise customers globally, to talk about our Chrome enterprise features, or to also hear from them if they've already deployed Chrome in their enterprise, or were some of the thinking that caused them to do so, or what are the things and the features that they are leveraging to use it in their environment. And so this talk is really a culmination of those experiences, talking with customers, in terms of what were the influencing factors that caused them to think about bringing a modern browser into their environment, and why the timing of a Windows 10 migration made a lot of sense for them. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the industry trends that are happening in end-user computing, and then talk about our Chrome Enterprise features that are making our customers feel confident about being able to start that modern journey by deploying a modern browser with Chrome. So first are really the three key trends in enterprise endpoints that we're seeing our IT customers feeling the need or feeling the pressure, if you will, to do something different from what they've typically done in supporting a browser. The first is around the increase in adoption of cloud-based applications. The second is around the complexity that is growing around trying to manage endpoint security. And the third is around prioritizing the user experience. So the first trend around cloud adoption is we're seeing that in order for companies to stay competitive, they need to be agile. And so there's this trend away from on-prem applications, and they're looking to adopt cloud-based applications. And so this stat here from a study are finding that an average worker would use 22 different cloud-based applications, and that's across 3 different devices. And just by a show of hands, who would actually say that they work in their browser for a third of their workday? A good chunk of hands. I'm just curious, how many would be half of their workday in the browser? OK, so actually this stat would say across an average user across multiple verticals, they're finding that they are actually in the browser for a third of their workday. And for folks like myself, I actually live in the browser because the browser is my desktop. But again, seeing the fact that more and more users are using the browser as a main tool in their environment to get their work done, we're seeing that the browser, a modern browser, if you will, is becoming even more important to provide to their users. And the 81% represents the 81% of customers that have already deployed cloud applications and are going to prioritize for future applications in their business to be cloud-based or SaaS-based applications. And so for a Windows 10 migration, a lot of IT leaders are sort of taking a step back to realize that the business is asking us to be able to support these applications that are being built based on modern web protocols. And these applications typically work better in a modern web browser. And so they're considering Windows 10 as that event to be able to plan and implement that in their migration. So this cloud adoption and this trend towards adopting cloud-based applications is actually influencing how IT endpoint managers are looking at what kind of priorities do we have to put in place here. And as we see here, the browser is on top because 50% of IT enterprises are putting a greater emphasis around browser security. A second priority with browser in the top there is the increased and the need to support the monitoring of the browser activity as well. These other priorities are really indirectly linked, I would say, to the browser as well, because IT admins or IT leaders are looking at how can we actually provide different operating systems or different tools to enable this more mobile and flexible work style. And so that brings us to our second trend around endpoint security that's driving IT leaders to consider having a modern browser as part of their strategy overall. And so due to this movement to cloud, the data is outside of the 4 walls of your corporate environment. And so being able to get behind or getting to the enterprise data in a user is becoming all the more important. And the bad actors out there know that. They know that the gold mine is behind a user credential for an enterprise user. And so Google's actually found in a study that a corporate user is going to be 4 times more likely to be a victim of a malware attack, or even 6 times more likely than a consumer user to be a recipient of a phishing email. And in a study interviewing security experts over the past 24 months, they're finding 73% of these experts are finding that it has become even more difficult to manage endpoint risk. So taking security one step further. The complexity of being able to manage these solutions and staying ahead of what's ever evolving, the cost of these attacks are also mounting as well. And so in 2016, a study found that across 3 million different ransomware attacks, that cost enterprises $1 billion. And another study found and predicted that in 2017, that'll be a cost of $5 billion across all enterprises. And that's actually a 15 times fold to just 2 years prior. So the impact to enterprises can be devastating if there's a successful attack. And so a lot of IT leaders and security experts are looking at, while they're planning for this Windows 10 migration, and we're looking at the security stack, what can we do to even bolster or add another layer of security to our environment? And they're looking to a modern browser to be able to secure that. And they look to Chrome specifically because Chrome has a lot of integrated security baked in. We have the capability of auto-updating, so you're always on the latest version of Chrome. We're continuing to evolve our security with every step. We more recently, for the vulnerability of Spectre earlier in this year, we were able to have a mitigation available with site isolation. So we're continuing to stay ahead and be the leader in terms of protecting our users, both our enterprise and our consumer users. The third trend that's really kind of pushing enterprise to sort of think about needing to put a modern browser in their environment is the shift towards a user-centric model in IT. Everyone has a cell phone. Everyone's used to, from a consumer side, being able to access data from anywhere and immediately. And so this is actually filtering into how corporate users are expecting to be able to work and be able to manage their data. And so we're seeing, too, that the browser is that portal in being able to do a lot of that work. So we're seeing that 67% of employees are relying on a browser to get their work done. And that's an increase over the last 2 years. 94% of employees are actually finding it easier to work in a browser than in a desktop app. And from a Chrome perspective, we have 2 billion 28-day monthly active instances out there. And so from an IT leader's perspective, when they're thinking about what can we do to give the tools to make our folks the most productive possible, knowing that there's this big base of users that are already familiar with browser, with Chrome browser, if you will, it really makes sense to consider giving the folks the tools that they need. Additionally, too, if they want to attract the next gen of the workforce, they're used to being able to have this multiple access point, being able to have flexible work style lifestyles. And so being able to give them the tools they need is also of critical importance. And so Chrome had a very interesting and a very important milestone back in March of 2016 when Chrome became the most popular consumer browser. And not only on the consumer end, but on the developer side too, we find that developers love working in Chrome. The Chrome Web Developer Tool is not just to develop for Chrome, but to basically develop across all open web-based standards. And so I've actually talked to a lot of enterprise customers where it was the developer group within their company that was the biggest advocate, the biggest push to be able to get Chrome to be supported in their environments. So we sort of touched upon the 3 big trends that are putting these multiple pressure points on IT to say, hey, your stance on a browser really needs to change. You really need to think about bringing in a modern browser, a browser that lets us do our work in the best way possible. And so with that in mind, in the context of an OS migration, again, to take another poll of the room, who's actually started their Windows 10 migration already? So pretty good show of hands. Actually, this correlates to the statistics we have here in this study, that 60% of businesses globally have actually started their Windows 10 deployment, or they've had some start of a deployment in their environment. And that's actually at a rate higher than previous Windows versions. But irregardless of that, an OS migration is not a trivial thing. It's a significant IT effort. As many of you in the room know, right, there's a lot of planning, discovery, and then the deployment itself. You're looking at interoperability of those applications. Are they going to work for you? Do you have to have hardware compatibility? From a user perspective, is there any disruption? Do they need a fresh install, or can they do something in place? So there's all these efforts. And then on the change management piece too, right? What kind of training documentation or support documentation needs to be updated? And then communications to end users. This is changing. This is our timeline. There is a lot of work involved here. But what our customers are finding is that in terms of a browser or adopting a modern browser, a lot of these steps are actually the same that you would take, and the same resources that would be doing the same steps in an OS migration. And so many of them are being opportunistic. They're saying, you know what, this makes a lot of sense. We're going to a newer operating system. We're going to be asked by the business, if we're not already, we know it's going to come down the line to be supporting newer applications that work better in a modern browser. The time is right for us to really start planning or start to deploy with this new OS migration. And this also becomes another point for customers that have sort of allowed Chrome to be installed in the wild, if you will, so a user-installed implementation of Chrome, but the enterprise isn't managing this by policy. And so they're also taking this as an opportunity to corral all of those users in and use policy to be able to have a common set of policies across your entire enterprise. So from a security standpoint, that's very key as you're moving forward. So enterprises, when they're evaluating the different modern browsers out there, the customers I've spoken to have chosen Chrome based on these 4 key value propositions. The first being cross-platform. So Chrome works across every major platform that you know, the Windows, Mac, Linux, and from a mobile on the desktop side, and then from a mobile side, we've got iOS and Android. And from the context of a Windows migration, Chrome works across XP, 7, 8, 10, and so you're able to have that multiple version of Windows with a single browser experience from a modern browser perspective. From a security standpoint, enterprises actually love the baked-in features that I mentioned earlier. So with sandboxing architecture, you have the processes that are isolated from each other, so you can contain any sort of malware within those browsers, and you're also protecting from the underlying operating system. And from the safe browsing capability, so if you're not familiar with safe browsing, if a customer were to go to a known malicious site, there's a big red box. It's very hard to ignore that says, hey, you're going to an area that is unsafe. Make sure you know where you're going. And in fact, what's happening is I've talked to customers that are leveraging and integrating the safe browsing alerts that come up there as part of their security training. So they're leveraging the free things that are available, the security enhancements that we've put into Chrome, as part of their own security posture. And they love the fact that safe browsing is actually not only protecting the users from themselves, but protecting their enterprises from their own users. The third point on productivity. So not only do users know Chrome and feel comfortable in working with Chrome, Chrome Sync enables you to start from anywhere, from any place where you left off. But I've actually talked to customers that have found in evaluating the different browsers that these modern-based applications work best in Chrome. They're finding that they're working faster, and that just that being able to do work faster oftentimes has a bottom line to revenue. And an example of a customer that for a call center, every call that they can process faster means dollars for them. So that was a key business decision around adopting Chrome specifically. Another way of looking at productivity that I've heard from a customer is really around having a modern browser to support these modern applications on Chrome allows your developers to be freed from not having to backward test or QA against a legacy browser, because you've held this stance of we only support a legacy browser for all of our applications. So you're freeing up developer time, which is very costly to customers. And they see that when they do the calculation of saving even 10% of a developer's time of not having to do that on a legacy browser, it can amount to a lot. And just think about the fact that you're not doing that on testing for legacy browsers, but you're taking that time and putting it towards innovation. And finally, we're talking about the value around controls. So Chrome browser has a lot of group policies, over 300, and we're continuing to build into that. And I've talked to customers that have decided to standardize their modern browser on Chrome simply for the fact that they have this level of granularity of control around policies. Typically, we've seen policies applied through Windows GPOs. And some common set of policies that we've seen are around managing updates. And so if you happen to be in my colleague's talk prior to today, a lot of updates around how to manage how Chrome updates. Sorry, policies around how Chrome updates. Another set of popular policies are around managing extensions. So being able to whitelist, blacklist, or force install extensions gives an opportunity for security experts to vet and approve of extensions before they let that into their environment and in their enterprise. The other use case around policies I see commonly are just the user experience, right? Like, what are some managed bookmarks or home pages that we want to set? Maybe we want, from a security standpoint, to disable some Google services and how their users log into Google, for example, with their private email. But for some of you in the room that are Google customers and have Google accounts, may be aware of our cloud-based management platform, the Google Admin Console. And so from a Chrome perspective, we do have the capability of managing Chrome through cloud policy. When you're signed into a browser, these policies flow down to that instance. And since version 64 for Windows and 66 in Mac, we have the capability of now forcing a user to sign into the browser. And in that way, those cloud policies can then be enforced. And so I'm talking to a lot of Windows customers that they don't want to manage Chrome with GPO anymore. And they're very attracted in this idea of being able to manage Chrome via policy. And what's very nice about our policies is you can have platform-based or on-prem policies applied through GPO, but you can heterogeneously also have cloud policies applied too. And so I want to just, for those of you in the room that are not familiar with our admin console, I have a quick demo here. OK. So this is a client. We have a Chrome instance here, but no policies applied. And we're not signed in. And so it's just like an unmanaged Chrome instance. So we're going to sign into the browser next at some point. Hopefully. I think it's waiting for my talk over. There we go. And so once we sign in, we're going to see new policies pop up. Because we've set these in the past. Oh, we have incognito capabilities, because we're going to basically demonstrate turning that off by cloud. But we have some cloud policies that have now flowed down because we've signed in as a user to the browser. So now we're going to go into the admin console, and we're going to log in with our admin credentials. This is the portal to not only manage Chrome browser cloud policies, but this is where you would manage Chrome OS devices, as well as G Suite users. But next, we're going to go to the OU in which this user resides. In this case, it's going to be Chrome browser for our next policy demo. Then we're going to jump straight to the incognito policy. And we're going to basically disallow incognito. And after we do that, we save our policy changes. And when we jump over to the client and we reload those policies just to make sure that they come in quickly, we see now that that cloud policy is now applied. And if we go to try to do incognito, it's no longer available. So what attracts a lot of people to the cloud-based policy is that this supports being able to manage Chrome across all your platforms, not just Windows, but if you have Macs in your environment. So you're able to manage that from a central point and do it very simply. So getting back to policies in Chrome, irregardless of how you apply your policies, be it via GPO or via the cloud, Chrome policies can be applied irregardless of Windows versions, right? And so a lot of our customers that are evaluating or have the thought forward of, OK, we are going to have a modern browser. We've got to figure out how to do this. We are in the midst of doing this migration for Windows 10. But understanding how Chrome policies work, we don't actually have to wait until Windows 10 is deployed for us to get started on our modern browser journey. So a lot of our customers are actually deploying Chrome in their Windows environment too. And that's practical in the sense that you're not going to be in Windows 10 in one day. It's a journey to get there. And so being able to start on your modern browser journey today through Windows 7, you're able to do so. And the policies that you set in Windows 7 will be the same policies that will flow down to when you migrate that user to Windows 10. So customers are finding a lot of benefit around around starting deploying Chrome in Windows 7. And so for those of you that are not familiar with how to apply policies with Chrome, I have a little demo here set up. Okay. Right. So this is just our little lab environment here. I have this window simulating our AD and our GPO server. And then we have two clients, one representing a Windows 7 and a Windows 10 client. They have Chrome installed, but again, there's no policies applied, so they're like unmanaged systems. So the first thing to do to get to our policies is to go to our chrome.com/enterprise site, which we're going to do in just a second. right? And here's where you can download our bundle. We also have this bundle broken out below, but for this purpose, we're just going to show how you can download the bundle in either 32 and 64-bit. Once we download it, let's take a look at the bundle itself. So within the bundle under the installers directory, we have 2 MSIs, or Microsoft installers, that have the latest version of Chrome Stable, and then a legacy browser support MSI, which I'll talk about in a demo just shortly. And if we go to the configuration directory, we'll see several files, one for ADM templates and ADMX. And if we open up ADMX, we'll see all of the ADMX templates that correlate to Chrome. And then we have the corresponding language files within the ADML directory. So we don't show it for this demo here. And actually, Jeff, from his previous session about how to manage updates, gave a more in-depth talk about how to copy those policies over. But once you do that in the policy definitions folder, you'll see under the admin templates directory a Google directory under which all of our Chrome policies now can be applied. So let's just take a look at applying a couple policies here. The one we'll start off with is define domains allowed to access G Suite. And this is really interesting for customers that basically want to prohibit their users from logging into their personal Gmail. So they're going to put in a domain that is allowed to log into G Suite. So if you have a G Suite account with us, you can put that in there. And then let's add another policy of enabling the bookmarks bar so that we can see that, because we're going to then also add some managed bookmarks to sort of simulate a set of internal applications that apply to all of your end users. And then finally, just for show, we're going to add the home button so that it shows up against the Omnibox by default. All right, once we set those policies, let's go into the client. We'll force the group policy update. And once we do that, we'll see on the policy window in Chrome that our new policies have shown up. And we can see that we see the home button, the managed bookmarks now show up. And now if we try to log in with a personal Gmail account, let's see what happens. We are blocked by that policy. But if we want to try to log in with a user that is on a good domain or an approved domain, we're all logged in. OK. And so basically, the policies that you've set for Windows 7, we're going to look to see what we can do in Windows 10, what needs to be done. All you need to do is force a group policy update. And those policies that we applied are going to be the exact same and pushed down to the Windows 10 environment. So it's a really seamless transition when you're moving from Windows 7 from Windows 10 from a policy perspective. You have one set of policies that you need to set and apply, and you're very easily able to migrate those users from Windows 7 to Windows 10. So we've now talked about how easily it is to have Chrome policies to be applied and translate smoothly from Windows 7 to Windows 10. But now I want to address the other elephant in the room as to why a lot of enterprises have shied away from adopting a modern browser. So I want to take another show of hands in the room. How many people here would say they are being asked to support legacy web applications in their environment today? OK, good show of hands. Who are also being asked to support modern web apps that work better in a modern browser? Similar show of hands. And so what's happening is we're at this inflection point of we're seeing more and more apps that work better in a modern browser, and yet a lot of customers have shied away from that because they're a little worried about confusing their end user. If we put multiple browsers out there, they're going to try to open up a legacy web app in a modern browser and then call support. So they really do shy around that. But the fact is, with all the trends we talked about, right, the business is asking IT to figure out how can you get to these modern browsers or modern applications. How can you help us support this? And so there's a key Chrome feature that our enterprise users are leveraging to be able to then confidently put out a modern browser and to be able to live in this sort of bimodal world. And this is to really be, in this first step of this journey, it's really being able to support a dual browser strategy. So a good modern browser strategy isn't really a rip and replace of a legacy browser and putting in a modern browser. It's really about taking that first step, putting your toe into being able to support a modern browser that works better for these applications. And so this feature that customers are using is called legacy browser support. And what this enables an IT admin to do is via policy, be able to control the user experience to say, you're always going to be in the browser that works best for this particular URL or application. And so from an end user's perspective, it takes away the guesswork of what browser I should be using, and it reduces the support calls you're going to get from IT perspective to know that a specific application isn't working. And so it's this feature that customers are leveraging because they know then that they have the level of control, because as applications deprecate or they move to modern applications, they control that all in the back end via policy. So next I want to show a demo on what legacy browser support looks like to install, and then what it is like to, from the end user's perspective, what that experience is. So we have our lab environment here. This is our Windows 10 client, and this is our AD GPO environment. And so the first thing to do, OK. Yeah, so in this side, we have Chrome installed. There are no policies. The extension has not been, there's no extensions installed, or the legacy browser add-on has not been yet added. So the steps or the key components of installing Chrome, legacy browser support are in 3 components. First, we have an extension shown here from the Chrome Web Store. And I'm highlighting the Chrome Web ID or App ID because we'll need that later to force install the installation. I've already downloaded or installed the legacy browser policy definitions template. So we're going to use this as you see that those policies apply there or have shown up. The third step is downloading the MSI or the legacy browser installer, the add-on for the host side or for the IE side. And you can download the latest version from our help center. OK, we're going a little faster. We got to actually now we're going to install. So our first step is to force install that extension. And so the syntax to do that is that web ID that we mentioned from the Chrome Web Store, and then also the auto-update URL. In this case, it's the Chrome Web Store. So we're going to force install that extension. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the policies for legacy browser support. And in this case, we're going to use the IE enterprise site list, because many customers actually have to maintain that right now. So it's basically going to point legacy browser to that site. And I have a sample site here, just to open up, to tell Chrome to open up to example.com, acme.com, or msn.com. So we've set the policies. We're going to go to the client now, and we're going to force install, or so we're going to install locally, in this case, the legacy browser support MSI. It's packaged in as an MSI, so you would normally use your regular software packager. And we see here now that we've installed it. And we're going to force install or force the group policy update to see that the extension is now installed, and the legacy browser policy is pointing to the site mode list. So now that we've installed legacy browser support, let's take a look at it from the end user's perspective. Let's go to a legacy site from Chrome. We see that it's automatically going to open you up to the legacy browser. And if we go to, say, another site that's not in the site list, it automatically switches you back to Chrome. So you now have that capability of, from an end user perspective, they can put in that URL from any of those 2 browsers, and they're always going to land in the right browser for the best experience. All right. Yeah. All right. So to take away some main points here, we have the key trends around endpoint computing, the rapid adoption of cloud applications that require a modern browser, the continuing complexity in managing security in the endpoint, and this user-centric model for IT to support to give your users corporately the best user experience are what are really causing enterprises to take note on considering a modern browser as part of their Windows 10 migration. But the great news is you don't actually have to wait for Windows 10 to get started. You can get started now wherever you are with Windows, because our policies apply generally across all of those versions. And the Chrome enterprise features of our integrated security, our productivity benefits, as well as having all of these group policies to be able to give you that level of control are what are making enterprise users, making our enterprise users choose Chrome as their modern browser, and leveraging legacy browser support as that key feature to be able for you to live confidently with one toe in the legacy application world as well as the modern-based application world. So I hope now that you've heard about our features, are excited about trying some of those things out. all of the features I've talked about are freely available for you to use from an enterprise perspective. And so that bundle that I mentioned can be found at chrome.com/enterprise. Some customers want to be able to call Google for support for Chrome browser. So we actually do have a support offering that you can find out more information about. I am actually part of a team of specialists to talk about all of these features with customers. So if you have any questions, our alias is there. I only talked about a few of our policies of the 300, but if you want to understand or know all about our entire set, you can see them at the Chromium.org site there. And for many customers, wanting to keep up in Chrome and all of the changes globally are very difficult, but we've started a process of now having enterprise release notes for Chrome, and they're in a repository there where you can actually sign up and get an email push so that you can always stay up to date on what's happening in Chrome, not only in the latest release, but in terms of what's coming. And finally, we have an extensive knowledge base of information in terms of how to deploy some of these features at our Chrome Enterprise Help Center. I do want to give a little shout out to the rest of our Chrome Enterprise presentations at Next. We have 2 more that are going to be focused on Chrome Enterprise on Thursday, so I do encourage you to go check those out. And I want to thank you guys all for your time and attention. We do have some time left in this session. We have a good chunk of us from the Chrome Browser Enterprise team, so I encourage you to come and ask us questions, or you can ask a question right now.